Hi there and welcome to Sean Cameron Photographic. Now, I started this channel talking about film cameras, then DSLRs. Now, I admit that I didn't exactly embrace the mirrorless revolution when it first appeared over the distant horizon, but now it's arrived and settled itself in, I'm actually quite smitten. And given my love of older cameras, I was really excited to try the retro Nikon Zfc. I even used the FM2 that inspired it. This battered little one, in fact. Now, the FM2 was a solid piece of kit. The body was a copper, aluminium, silicon alloy construction, and the early models even sported titanium shutter blades. On top of that, the camera was advertised as capable of performing at temperatures of -40 right up to +50. That's centigrade. Now, the ZFC, like most copies, doesn't come near to that rugged engineering, but in truth, it doesn't need to. The body's now made from a lighter magnesium alloy, and obviously it doesn't need shutter blades, titanium or otherwise. It isn't aimed at the semi-pro or even as a pro second camera, as this one was for me. It is, however, designed to make old sods like me drool, and the cool youngsters just question our sanity. What's not to love? It's got dials to play with, not the modern flat spinny ones, real lumpy tactile nerd ones that I remember fondly from my younger days. Though I think my eyes were a lot younger then as well, because I'm struggling to see the numbers without my reading glasses. But you know the odd thing? I check through my collection and I can pretty much read the dials on all of them, including the FM2. Now I think it's because the original Nikon dials had a matte finish, whereas this one's got a glossy, it's almost satin, which reflects all available light. Now that doesn't stop me having the grin factor, oh no. In fact, I'm starting to think that these knobs and dials have a direct connection to the corners of my mouth, because whenever I get to use them, this involuntary smile is almost impossible to contain. But enough of this guff. How did I get on? Well, firstly, I found the position of the menu button has changed from the rest of the previous Z range. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's flipping irritating. I keep hitting the display button, which I then have to keep pressing just to cycle back from where I started. By which time I've lost track of what I wanted to change, and now indulge me, it's an age thing. Now, bearing in mind that when I bought the FM2 back in the 80s, it was for about £380. Calculating for inflation, that would be about 1100 today. So seeing as the ZFC is going for 900, I think Nikon have priced it about right. When I set the ZFC up for video, it had its ups and downs. For a start, the rest of the Z series uses an HDMI-C output, but somewhat irritatingly, the Z50 and this ZFC use the HDMI Type D. Again, I'm not sure why, possibly because of the body size, perhaps to keep the price down. But luckily I was saved from having to order yet another type of lead. We've all got loads of them, haven't we? Because I'd already got one for my Sony A7 III. And I tested that a while back. Now on the plus side, I absolutely love the flip out screen. I can see the settings and everything whilst facing the camera. And that's fantastic news for vlogging and selfies. And don't snigger at the selfie. How do you think I get these moody stunners? What isn't such great news is the position of the battery in the memory card. Because when the camera's mounted on a tripod, it's completely impossible to change the battery and almost impossible to change the card. Something I encountered whilst filming this video, in fact. I thought I was being smart, attaching the camera to the tripod using the FTZ mount. I still can't get the card out. Another good reason to put it somewhere else, Nikon, rather like here. Like your other cameras. That'd have been useful, wouldn't it? I also really wish that it was full frame. The increased magnification isn't something I really need when the subject's me and videoing a find or busy space gets a bit challenging. But, okay, the only way we can actually test the ZFC for vlogging is to, well, use it for vlogging. Okay, so I'm outside, which is where vloggers spend about 40% of their time. I certainly spend more of my time indoors, it seems. But anyway, nonetheless, at the moment I've got the ZFC filming one side and I've got the Z6 II filming on the other side. Now, to film the backs of both of those, I've got the D5. Okay, so I'm using AFF or autofocus full-time focus, so it should actually see my face or it should see my eyes. Hopefully the D5 is picking that up. I think I've also got, in fact I know I've got it to set to people. And as I'm a person, it should pick me up, should it not? But so what happens if I move around? Because vloggers don't just stand still, do we? We do wander around a little bit. We may want to go over here. We may want to duck down here. So has it still followed me? I don't know. What happens if we go indoors? Is there any difference? Admittedly, I don't move around too much when I'm videoing indoors, but I do wave things around in front of me rather a lot. Hopefully this doesn't distract either camera and I stay in perfect focus. Now, that section was filmed using two 24-70 f2.8 lenses, and because they're both f-mounted, I got the chance to use my new FTZ2 adapter, and I was going to do a review on it. But as it appears to be identical in technical build to its predecessor, there's really no point. Other than to say it no longer has a protruding mounting point, or any other mounting point in fact. Oh, and it probably rolls better now. Anyway, back to the camera. And if I find myself running low on battery power whilst recording, there's a handy USB socket that can be used to power or recharge the camera. That's really useful. The ZFC's video quality is perfect for YouTube. Yes, you're never going to record anything in, say, James Bond 007 movie quality, but it's still capable of producing 4K if you need it to. And you never know, you might find that the retro styling of the camera also brings out the inner Hollywood star in you. Well, I think that's probably enough of this malarkey. A more sensible version of me will now talk about using the ZFC for stills. Well, I'll tell you one thing, the novelty of using the old school dial for the shutter speed wore off very soon. Pretty much as soon as I started taking photographs with this camera, to be quite honest with you. You see, back in the day, the good old days, it didn't matter if it took 6 seconds, and yes, I timed it, to take the camera from your eye, dial in the required number, bring the camera back up, and recompose the image. Generally, you already set up for the shot anyway, way before you've taken it, and any light changes were classed as arty. Mid-composure ISO adjustments were pretty unnecessary with the film anyway, but with digital I use it all the time. I guess part of all that is because tolerance for exposure was so much wider with film, as were our expectations. If I look at my little FM2, the shutter speeds were from 1 second to 4,000 in increments of double. That's 1, 2, 4, 8. The same as the F4 and right back to the original F and beyond. And it's the same with the dials on the ZFC. The difference is, with film, that's all we really needed. But with digital, we are so much more demanding, more exacting. Would you be happier if you blew out some whites? No, you wouldn't. You'd complain about it. We expect to see details in the shadows. That's why we now need the increments to increase by thirds. 1, 1.3, 1.6, 2, 2.3, 3, etc, etc. Further up we have 800, 1250, 1600, 2000, and we do the same with the ISO. It all helps our exposure to be far more accurate, and therefore we're now constantly adjusting our settings according to the slightest atmospheric change. With the ZFC, I set the shutter speed dial to 1/3 step, which meant that actually I could use the rear dial for my adjustments, which gave me the shorter adjustments. And to be quite honest, that's why this camera highlights the way that technology has improved our way of working. And just in case you're shouting, "But Sean, I can easily change the shutter speed dial and keep my eye to the viewfinder," well, Nikon have made the task just a little bit more challenging by introducing a locking button on top of the dial. And try changing the ISO dial while composing the shot. That too has a locking button. Funnily enough, the only dial not to have a lock is the one that needs it most, the exposure compensation dial, which is neatly situated where the rear control dial is on the Z6 II. So guess what I keep doing? Anyway, back to the handling and images. The Zfc tracking is okay, nothing spectacular now. I'm used to the Z9, but it was just about usable. I was using animal tracking here and it finds the head and eye okay. The 11 frames a second is more than enough, and isn't that shutter sound enticing? More mechanical than the Z6 II. Now don't get me wrong, it's not the gorgeous ring of the F3 or the mechanical competence of the F4, but it gives a hint of simpler times. These images are JPEG straight out of the camera, and they're absolutely fine with enough detail and realistic colour to please most photographers. They were all taken in low light, it was very overcast, and have retained their overall hues extremely well. Now the ZFC isn't renowned for high ISO quality, but I went right up to 4000, then 8000, and then finally 10,000, with no obvious sign of noise or loss of detail. Pretty impressive. I took these using the Z70-200 2.8 lens, and if you use anything larger than say a 24-70, you'll notice a problem with the balance and the handling. See, the camera is very light, 445 grams even with the battery in, so it tends to tip forward with a longer lens. Now that's not a deal breaker, but it does mean it makes it more difficult to use the zoom ring and function buttons. And do you remember what I said about the memory card positioned at the base of the camera? Look what happened when I got back to the office and I tried to take the card out. Yeah, even the mounting plate stops me opening the door enough. Terrible design, Nikon. Okay, now you'd be forgiven for thinking I dislike this camera. I don't. I'm actually quite fond of it. For videoing myself, it's really good, especially with the screen opening out, so I can frame myself. That's really useful. It saves me from having to take a test video, go back to the camera to check either I haven't chopped my own head off, reset it up, go back, try and remember where I was standing in the first place. Oh, don't. It happened in the early days frequently. To take self-portraits, you keep the screen out, and just by tapping it, the self-timer starts. And that gives you plenty of time to compose yourself for up to 9 shots. The video tracking system seems to be less distracted by my hands than my Z6 II, and the camera is definitely pocket-sized. You can always get somebody else to carry the lenses, can't you? So yes, I like it as a fun but occasional use camera. You could use it for Uncle Fred's fun birthday party, but not one of his important ones. It's quirky and it's retro, but I couldn't use it every day. In fact, for a blast of nostalgia, I'm more like to knock the dust off one of these. But as a nifty, candid and video camera, do you know, I think I'm going to keep it. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you like this video, you know what I'm going to say. Like it. And if you really liked it, do keep subscribing, everybody. Thank you so much. It means so much. If you subscribe, I know that I'm doing the right thing. Anyway, thank you so much once again for joining me, and I'll see you soon. And in the meantime, take care. Bye.